This is Amend and Progress, your go-to podcast from Vidori for all things promotional material review. Get ready for actionable insights, valuable perspectives, and best practices to elevate your workflow and team morale.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Amend and Progress, Vidori's podcast about the material review process. I'm your host, Annalise, and today we're going to be talking about how to cultivate an engaged and motivated life science team. Joining me in the conversation today is Nicholas Capman, President and CEO of the FDA Group and author of the book, The Passionate Workforce. Nick, welcome to the show. Delighted to have you here today.
Likewise, thanks for having me.
Could you just quickly introduce yourself, talk a bit about you, FDA Group, your book, just a brief introduction would be great.
Yeah, sure. So, like you mentioned, I'm the president and CEO of the FDA Group. I started the company in 2007, and simply stated, what we do is we help pharmaceutical and medical device companies with the FDA, just like an accountant would help you with the IRS or a lawyer would help you with the DOJ. So that's essentially what we do. The Passionate Workforce, how to create and maintain maximum employee engagement is the book that I published in June of this year. And I'm happy that it was able to make #1 Amazon bestseller list. So I'm excited to kind of talk around topics surrounding leadership and management and see where we go.
Well, first of all, congratulations. What a feat to publish a book. That's amazing. And I am incredibly excited for the conversation today. Not only because I think this is a great topic that most people can relate to, but we often talk about when it comes to Vidori and sort of the content approval process, it's made of human beings. Human beings have to know how to work together. Leaders have to know how to manage those teams. And so I'm just anticipating there's going to be so much great information and insights in today's episode for those leaders to cascade into their life science team. So really excited to get into it today.
Okay.
Before we talk the passionate workforce, I do have my getting to know you questions I like to ask at the top of the hour. Are you up for it? Just two easy ones.
Oh, yeah, go for it. Fire away.
Okay. All right, great. My first question is, what is your signature dish or recipe?
So, my wife is Brazilian,
Okay.
and we used to live in Brazil during the summers when our kids were out of school. So I've spent a significant amount of time in Brazil, and one of the popular dishes to cook is picanha, which I think is top sirloin. It's cut different in Brazil. The fillet looks like a #9, with the interior being all meat and the exterior being fat. And there is a artistic way of seasoning it and grilling it and cutting it and serving it. And I hyped that up like a really, really good movie. And no matter how high I hype it up, after somebody tastes it, they go, that was better than I thought.
Wow.
So it would be my ability to grill, serve picanha.
Amazing. It sounds like not only something delicious to eat, but like an event too, like a thing you can sort of rally around the table. So that's really cool. Second
Absolutely.
que second question is, what is one productivity hack, best practice you use in your daily life?
Yeah. So I use Asana, which is
Hmm.
a task tracking system. And I use it every day, all day, to prioritize and track what I need to do. And I can push things out months, years. I can set multiple things. So for anybody that is looking for a task management tool, I like and would recommend Asana.
Very cool. Love to hear about the tooling that we're actually using in our day-to-day life. So I'll include a link in the show notes if folks are interested in checking out more about that.
Hmm.
Okay, well, let's dig into it. Sort of, I'd love to start the conversation just learning a bit more about what inspired you to write The Passionate Workforce. Was there a galvanizing event? Did something happen within your life that motivated you to write this? Or just talk to me a bit about sort of where the book came from.
Yeah, so uh, I like to say that I live in a state of being constantly comfortably uncomfortable. And what that means is I'm comfortable in the sense that I know I've got control over what is going, what's happening in the moment, and in my job and my personal life, all that stuff. But the truth of the matter is, and this applies to everyone all the time, is there's something we're not doing right now that if we had been doing it, we would be more productive and successful. And so I'm constantly looking for what is that next thing that I can do. That doesn't mean I'm the crazy CEO that every month says, forget everything I said last month, this is what we're doing. I'm not saying that. But certainly I feel like a detective and I'm always trying to figure out what is that next thing. So because that's how I operate, I put myself in a position to be able to optimize that. And so there's a couple of ways that I do that. One is I've implemented EOS, or the Entrepreneurial Operating System. I've been a member of Vistage, which is the world's largest CEO peer advisory group. I've been a member for over 10 years. And I hold myself accountable to read at least one, if not two, leadership, business, management books per quarter. So, and I've done that for over 10 years. So I've really accumulated a lot of information. And at some point, not somebody, multiple people would comment that I think differently. And what that told me was that I wasn't just repeating somebody else's ideas. I had taken everything that I had learned and kind of created this new perspective into leadership and management. And so when that happened, I created a Word document called Book Notes. And I found myself repeating a lot of the same kind of mantras, cliches, or kind of piece of advice, and so on and so forth. So when I would catch myself saying one of those after the meeting, I would go into my book notes and I would write it down. And so I came up with 4 pages of book notes. Then I saw an advertisement on LinkedIn for Scribe Media, and it spoke directly to me. I was their target market, so I read it. I said, "That's me," and I signed up, and that's how I wrote the book.
Wow, incredible. So it just started with a perspective and a note document and really took off from there.
Yeah,
Incredibly fascinating. Let's get into some of that perspective. I wanted to start with sort of this passion over resentment piece that you talk about in the book. And so you really do emphasize that there's an importance here of, passion over resentment in the workforce. How do you suggest leaders recognize and address early signs of resentment before it becomes detrimental or causing problems within teams and within the workplace?
yeah. So I'm going to answer that slightly different. So the original title of the book was The Passionate Workforce Spectrum, but that it was recommended that might be too long. So if you actually look at the logo behind me, it's kind of like a rising sun with the color spectrum, because that was what I was trying to represent. So on one end you have passion, and on the other end you have resentment. And all of us have been both passionate and resentful at some point in our life, especially in the workplace. So when it comes to passion, if you think about it, when you're passionate, you exert certain behaviors, right? You show up on time, you care about the quality of your work, you're innovative and creative, you're helpful, you're just a positive inspiration within your organization. And we all know how that feels, right? You wake up on Monday, you're ready to go. Similarly, we've all been resentful. Same person, different behaviors. We don't show up on time. We don't care about the quality of our work. We're not innovative and creative, helpful. We can badmouth the company and our boss and maybe even become destructive, right? So the issue is not necessarily how do you identify somebody that's resentful. That's easy to find, right? Because in our workplace, we have the A players, right? I would say they're probably passionate about what they do, right? And they're good. Then you've got the people that do just enough so they don't get fired, right? And I would say those are probably the resentful ones. Then there's the ones in the middle, right? And they could go either way. They could slide into resentment or they could move up into passion. And that's kind of really the focus. So what I did was I created 15 pillars. And my opinion and the purpose of the book is if you can, you know, do a good job of optimizing your ability to deliver on each of those 15 pillars, you will put yourself in the best position to create an environment where the people that work for you are in a passionate mindset, which then you can expect will provide optimized output from themselves. Does that make
Hmm.
sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's go to those 15 pillars because I know that this is, a core element of the book. And I imagine 15 is quite a few.
Mhm.
Can you talk me through maybe a couple that you would recommend leaders start with? Like, is there a prioritization to these 15 pillars, or like if you're a leader with some constraints and you're trying to create a more engaged workforce, are there certain pillars that you recommend folks start with or think more about before others?
I don't. I think they're all equally as important, and
Okay.
that's why there are 15. I would say that there's a couple things that we could look into, which is um, in the book, the 15 pillars is chapter 5. So before we actually even get into the 15 pillars, we talk about what is passion? Why is it important? And, kind of what are some of the things that impact it? And so there's kind of three things that popped into my head, right? One thing that I think about is passion starts at the first interview. So if you want a passionate workforce, it begins at the very first interaction that you have with a potential hire. So I have a whole chapter about how to go through the interview and onboarding process, and I compare it to dating, right? Go to the first date, introduce them to your friends, throw a party, have them move in, all that kind of stuff. So that is a unique, I would say, or creative perspective on that. One of the other things that I think is creative is I actually don't believe in merit-based compensation. I believe in profit sharing. And so that is a different perspective. I think some people say, oh, well, now people don't have to do their job, right? That's not what we're saying. We still set goals and we still hold them accountable, but there are some nuances around merit-based compensation and profit sharing. And then the third thing that kind of popped into my head that's a little bit creative is I'm an advocate for unlimited paid time off. And I have thoughts and ideas around why I think that's important.
Hmm. So, I mean, you're bringing up concepts that are company policies,
Hmm.
right? There's obviously other things that, can create this engaged workforce, but I'm curious, I imagine that a lot of team management literature out there is focused more on your processes and how you work together and collaboration. Where did sort of this emphasis on company policy come from? And is there like a real life example where you've seen implementing these types of policies generate more engaged workforces? Would just love to like understand where or why you decided to include some of those concepts within sort of this passionate workforce arena.
Yeah. Well, the concepts are mine. They were just organic or tried and true,
Hmm.
one or both at the same time. And we could jump into the 15 pillars and kind of pick, a couple, but the reason I brought up those three and the interview process would not be necessarily a company policy. Anybody that's going to be in a leadership and management role would have impact over that. The other two are company policies. And the reason that kind of jumps out is that's probably the two that I get the most pushback on, right? Like, oh, unlimited paid time off. I tried that. That didn't work. Or not going with merit-based compensation and giving everybody profit, that's a little, unique, right? So I kind of brought those two up because it's not common. I guess it depends on who you ask. So maybe some people are kind of more progressive, if that's the correct adjective, and they're more open to that. But those are kind of the policies that I think people kind of push back on. But I guess to go back to it, the interview one is one where any leader or manager is going to be engaged. And 95% of this book is for anybody that leads and manages. And there is 5% where we talk about company policy. And the reason I decided to include it is even if the reader doesn't have the power to implement those policies, I'm hopeful that they would have the ability to advocate for those types of policies and present it to those individuals that would have that authority.
Yep, makes total sense. Okay, if we could please, I would love to go back to the 15 pillars, and maybe there are a couple that you could bring to the table as just like bringing up, one to two of the pillars to the table and talking us through what the pillar is and how it does help create more of an engaged and passionate workforce, or how it helps move someone from the spectrum of more resentful to more passionate. Would love to just hear a little bit more about maybe one to two of the pillars.
Okay, sure. So I think one of them would be achieve a good work-life blend. And I use that word on purpose, achieve a good work-life blend as opposed to balance. I think back in the early 2000s, before we had a lot of this technology that was so widely used, when you were at work, that was kind of the only place you could do your work. And now, um, for a large portion of the population, we can do work anywhere, right? Um, there are some jobs where that's not possible, right? If we think about truckers and delivery people and manufacturing, right? So I think that's, this is kind of more focused on people that can work anywhere. But that idea, that pillar kind of came from um, let me take one step back. So when I created the FDA group, it was kind of like the anti-company. I guess I had a good amount of experience with bosses and companies where people weren't treated equally, or maybe not necessarily treated equally, but depending on your level in the organization, you felt like you could do things that other people couldn't. And, that kind of always rubbed me the wrong way. Like one of the things that kind of popped in my head was whenever I had a dentist appointment, I would always pick the very last appointment that I could get, right? And it was 3:45. And yet still, when I left, I still got that kind of, he's leaving early. And I'm like, man, you left at noon yesterday and went golfing. Like, what are you talking about? Like, why are there's these different rules. So in the work-life blend, I believe that anything that I as a CEO can do, anybody else can do. Okay. Now, if I am doing things that I don't want other people to do, I shouldn't be doing it, right? And if I am okay with other people doing it, then I should have the freedom to do it. So essentially what that boils down to is now we're in an environment where life has changed. We got to go pick up the kids. We are working from home and we got to let the dog out. We have to, run and take care of an errand. And it even goes so far as to, I got a headache, I'm going to lay down, right? Give people the agency over their time, and then they focus on the productivity as opposed to focusing on looking productive, right? So if I actually have agency and control over my time and there's no hours of operation within a reasonable range, and there's we don't track hours on all that stuff, we just focus on what people are producing. They should be able to engage in personal activities during the workday, knowing that at the end of the day they know they're going to be held accountable for their productivity. So I don't actually care if they do it in the day, in the morning, at night, just as long as they get it done, right? And that's within reason, because if, say, for instance, I'm a truck driver and I say, well, I'm going to go do something else, well, then you're not actually doing your job. And so you'll be held accountable for not doing your job because your job actually requires that you can't do that. And what that means is on the flip side, you should be able to, if you took off some personal time at night, go ahead and work then. I can't tell you how many times I've seen emails come through, my cell phone at 8 o'clock at night because, somebody had to do something during the day and they're working. Or even, holidays kind of tend to fall away because you have so much
Right.
agency over your time. There will be holidays where people just decide to work. And it kind of ties into the whole unlimited time off policy because if I have complete control and agency over my time, then I don't have a use it or lose it mentality, right?
Mm,
And so I don't, I'm too busy. I can't take any time off. And then I wait until December and I take 2 weeks off because I know I'm going to lose it. And then all I end up doing is sitting and watching Christmas movies and eating Cheetos on the couch. And I'm really not happier doing that. Really, at that point, I kind of would be happier just working. So it kind of ties in with that whole policy as well.
yeah. Talk to me a bit, because I imagine some of these things around unlimited paid time off, work-life blend, maybe a bit more expected in today's work environment, given, that many of us are remote. But it could be a culture shift for other organizations and a little bit of change management. Any advice or perspective you have on how to sort of change the culture of the organization to maybe adopt some of these more forward-facing policies that are maybe more expected in today's just working world?
Yeah, because it's going to apply to everyone, I'd be surprised that there would be a lot of pushback.
Hmm.
Some managers might have an issue, but no matter what your policy is, somebody's going to be upset, right? So, you kind of just have to say, look, this is what we're doing, and for that kind of really hardcore manager that's just work 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 all the time and everybody needs to work 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 all the time, that might be a little bit of a culture shift. But the data actually show that there's, I'm not doing it out of the goodness of my heart completely. I think part of it, and I'm not going to shortchange myself. Part of it is out of the kind of the goodness because I think people need to enjoy their lives and feel a sense of power and autonomy over their life. However, if we're looking at it from a more practical standpoint, when people are have agency over their time, they, again, we're going to the book, they become passionate about their job, right? So if I had one job where I get written up because I'm 5 minutes late and then I have to pretend that I'm busy for the last hour of the day because I've got nothing to do, then I go into another organization where it's nothing like that. Geez, I'm really excited. So what does that do? That's going to optimize my output because I'm being passionate. It's also going to help with retention. So you don't have to worry about a lot of turnover and having to rehire, retrain, all that kind of stuff. And that has a really serious financial cost to it. Um, and then the third thing, and this is the fact of the matter, is that people actually end up working more. So it's a very unusual paradox where you actually give people the opportunity to take more time off. They actually take a lot less. So for that manager that was really upset about, oh, they're gonna, abuse it, which they can, that person will probably actually find that people are working a bit more and happier doing so. Because
Mm.
instead of having to take a whole day off because I had a doctor's appointment, look, I'm just not, I'll just let you know, hey, I'm going to be out for a couple hours. I'll be back. Right. And not, so you're kind of utilizing it in that way. Did that
Yeah.
answer the question?
Absolutely. And I think part of at least what I'm starting to hear in some of your comments are that the employee is empowered by some of these policies, which obviously are going to make them more engaged and motivated. And I know that sort of employee empowerment is also something that you cover within the book. Why is empowering your employee important? And are there some tactics or best practices you think that leaders can employ to give their employees more empowerment, more agency, all of this, these great things.
Yeah.
Curious to dig into that a little bit.
Yeah. Well, one thing I did touch on quickly and then I skipped over it is can it be abused? And it can. Okay. And so you do need a policy in place, right? And so I would recommend people go to their HR department or their council to kind of create that policy. But, some things are like you can't take every Friday off, right? Or, you can't take 6 months maternity or paternity leave, right? So there's got to be like, some, uh, I guess, what do they call those on the sides of the road?
Guardrails or
Guardrails, right, to
mhm.
the policy, just to protect yourself against people
Sure.
saying, well, this is what you said, and there's nothing that says that I can't do it. So it does have to be well thought out and documented. So that is something that I would recommend for people that aren't into the policy piece. What do they need to do in order to get people excited about achieving a good work-life blend? I don't think there's a whole lot. I will tell you this though. Some people don't believe it, right? So you'll say you have complete agency, do what you need to do just as long as you get your work done. And they're like, yeah, but is it really like that? Are you just saying it to kind of make yourself look good, or do I actually have the ability to do that? And so we've had some employees that just wouldn't take any time off. And it wasn't a big issue until you started to see a little bit of that burnout. And you say, hey, listen, we're in October, you've taken 2 days off. Like, go. You gotta unwind. It's healthy to unwind. It's okay to be able to do that. And then I think just through the day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month uh, handling of that policy is what allows for other people to feel comfortable. Because initially, if you're gonna put a policy like that out, there's gonna be the early adopters, right? Just like technology, and they're, hey, great, boom, and they're using it right away because they believe in it. Then there's going to be kind of the late adopters that are kind of waiting to see, are they going to get yelled at? Are they going to have a secret conversation in the door, behind the door? And when they don't see that happening because you actually are holding people accountable for their productivity, not butts and seats, then those people start to feel a little bit more willing to engage in that policy and then find out that, hey, this actually is a real thing and it's not just a photo or a picture on the wall.
hmm So there's sort of this connectivity between policies, employee agency, and then some of what you're talking about is if the employee feels empowered and they feel they have agency, that has a relationship to productivity. What are sort of, from your perspective, the other outputs that come from agencies that feel empowered, or excuse me, employees that feel empowered and that they feel like they have agency? What are the other values to the organization at the top level?
It's everything that you'd want to see from an employee, right? And we kind of talked about that very when we first started, right? Now I say it's showing up on time, but in this type of environment, there really isn't a time to start. So you can't measure that, but you know that they're starting at an appropriate time. Um, One of the things is innovation and creation. So here's what's really, really hard to do. And actually there's a really good example, which is North Korea. They actually keep their population hungry on purpose so that they can't think about bigger life things, right? Like a philosopher from the Roman period. And what is life and what does it mean and what is happiness? When you're focused on hunger, you don't have that time, right? We think about Maslow's pyramid. So, so in this type of environment, when I have agency and I'm feeling passionate about what I'm doing, one of the other things that's mixed in that is security. And when I feel secure and I feel safe, now it allows me to kind of open my mind up
Hmm.
to more advanced and complex ways of thinking, right? Um, I did mention the hiring process, and one of the things that I recommend is that you tell people we don't encourage people to speak up, we require it. And one of the issues that a lot of employees have with former employers is, they didn't have a voice, right? Well, I also include in the book an experience I had. It was my second job out of college, and I was working, and I said, "Wow, look at these processes. These executives are stupid," you know. And I was wrong. They weren't stupid. What happened was the processes stayed the way they were because nobody felt safe to speak up. So so when we say we require it, I explain that and I encourage people to, to present similar stories, which is managers and leaders, they don't know everything. As much as you think we know everything, we don't know everything. We don't actually, you have your list of responsibilities, but we don't actually know exactly what you're doing and how you're doing and what's working and what's not working. And is that efficient? Is there a better way to do it? Have you seen another technology? We're not all knowing. And
Hmm.
so we want to create an environment for you to be safe so that that innovation, creativity, and continuous improvement can be optimized.
Hmm. I think that's a really important and powerful concept that your brain opens when you sort of have that basis of needs per your comment around Maslow's is fulfilled. It makes a lot of sense. I do want to just pivot lastly to meetings.
Mm,
You do talk about purposeful meetings
mm.
in the book, and can you just talk about maybe a couple specific strategies that you've seen work here? We're a lot of us are on Zoom, or if you're not in Zoom, I think just like there's this general concept of meeting overload, or just feeling like you get to a meeting and there's no clear agenda or it doesn't have purpose. Talk me through maybe some of these strategies that you've seen work to amplify, iterate, and make the most of meeting time.
Yeah. Well, so again, let's bring this all back to the book, which is passion,
Mm,
right? And being in a passionate mind. One of the things, to your point, that can bring passion down, cause frustration, and could lead to resentment is meeting overload. Why am I in here? Why are there so many meetings? Why is it so ad hoc? Why is it so unorganized? And in order for you to trust your company and trust the person that you report to, there's a mathematical equation, which is character times competence equals trust. So first, the company and the person I'm reporting to has to have character. And then, but they also have to be competent, right? And poor meeting structuring cadence can decrease a person's perception that that person is competent, which will again bring you from passion to frustration to resentment. So I recommend annual meetings, quarterly meetings, and weekly meetings. And in each of those meetings, there's a structure. So let's talk about annual meetings. And I like to use a football analogy because there's 4 quarters in a football game. So the annual meeting is the meeting that you have before your next game. That next game is next year. Who are we playing? What's going to be our strategy? What did we do last year? Right? Let's learn from what we did well and what we didn't do well. And then let's put a strategy together for the following year so that we can, again, optimize our outcome. Then you need the quarterly meetings. And the quarterly meetings are, okay, we got through Q1. This is what we thought was going to happen. This actually did happen and we did really good there, but we didn't expect this and that didn't work. So now we've got to pivot as we move into quarter 2. So that's that what do they call it? Not halftime, but no, the break in between quarters at a football game, right? Hey, this is what we did wrong, this is what we did right, let's change it. So that's the quarterly meeting. The weekly meeting is it really it's designed to end all other meetings. You've got one meeting a week, and that's where everything goes. Now, if there is something that is urgent that cannot wait until that next meeting, because if you think about it, it's going to be less than a week. Because if you just had a weekly meeting, the likelihood that something just popped up is, it can happen, but it's the next day or the day after, and it's only a couple days away. So can we put it on the short-term issues list and then discuss it in that meeting? So really the purpose of the weekly meeting is to eliminate all of the meetings, not have these ad hoc meetings. And really, I think it's imperative for leaders and managers to only invite the people that they want in the meeting. And I'll give you a great example. This happened to me today. I hired a contractor to provide subject matter expertise into an AI software that we're going to be developing with another developer. And so what she did was she looked at the master services agreement from a technological standpoint. So we've already looked at it from a legal, quality, and financial perspective. So that was what that person was providing. Well, in the project, we have a project manager that's a full-time employee. And he was CC'd on the email, and he saw that I was going to be having a meeting with her to discuss the MSA. And he said, "Hey, I saw that you're having a meeting. Do you need me there?" And I said, "No." And I said, "You can join if you want to join, but I don't think you need to be there." And he said, "All right, I'm not coming." Right. So only bring in the people that you need to, because, not only are we worried about, decreasing passion and moving people into frustration, but there probably was something that they could better utilize their time on. So it even ties into the whole giving people agency. Now, the other thing you talked about is kind of meeting structure, right? So I have what I recommend for, and we're not going to jump into quarterlies and annuals, but we'll jump into weekly structure, which is I like to start off meetings with good news, personally, professionally, starts things on a really good note. Some cases, people are going to present bad news, and that's okay. Give them space to do that. Somebody died, somebody's in the hospital, something bad happened, and you can't fake it and pretend like everything's fine. That's okay. But for the most part, we want to kind of keep it light, and here's some good news professionally and personally. Then you want to move into what we call the scoreboard. And a lot of this I was able to kind of bring from the EOS process, right? So in the scoreboard, that's where we're measuring how are we doing with our quarterly goals, how are we doing with our weekly goals, and things of that nature. Then we move into headlines, which is we're talking about the most important projects, right? And clients and whatever is important. And one of the things you hate to say is you find something out, well, I haven't heard anything about this. What happened? Well, if you're getting updates on a weekly basis, then you're probably pretty close in that loop, right? Then you move into what we call the short-term to-do list. That is what came from the previous meetings week, the previous week's meeting. So, okay, we decided we were going to do X, Y, and Z. That person was responsible to have this done by this date. So when you look at the short term to do, I can say, all right, Annalise, you were supposed to do X by today. Did you get it done? And you say, yep. And then we remove it. Or you say, oh my God, I completely forgot, or it's been delayed. Okay, that's fine. We'll leave it there until next week. Can it be done by next week? Yeah, it should be done by next week. Great way to hold people accountable. Then you move into the short-term issues list. That's the biggest part of the meeting. That is the what do we want to call it? The catch-all for everything that's been happening in the week that you wanted to discuss, but we're not going to call an ad hoc meeting and invite everybody and their mother, right? We're going to put it over there. And then you go through the short-term issues list and you look at each item, right? It'll say what we need to discuss and who called it out. And that person will say, okay. And then we have what we call the IDS, which is identify what's the issue, discuss it, and solve it so that it goes away forever. Now, when you solve it, That resolution probably requires an activity that's going to go on the short-term to-do. And most items take about a week. Some could take 2 or a month. If it's going to take a whole quarter, then we're probably going to make that a quarterly goal as opposed to something on the short term to do. But there's a rational and pragmatic process for holding a weekly meeting. And that again is going to show competency to the people in the workforce, which is if it doesn't increase passion, it certainly isn't going to decrease the passion.
Hmm. I mean, that is such like a practical, applicable thing that people can start today, which I think is an excellent way to close out the episode today. Nicholas, thank you so much. Clearly, I mean, this is such an important topic, and clearly the book is just packed with insights and perspectives and actionable things that leaders can implement at their organizations. So, folks, please go check out The Passionate Workforce. Nicholas, where can people, you mentioned the book is on Amazon, but where can people find you outside of the Amend and Progress podcast?
Sure. Best place to find me is on LinkedIn. That's where I'm most active. Sad to say that my Facebook has been hacked. And
Oh, sorry.
I've been trying to fix that for a week and I still don't have access to
Oh
it.
no.
So if I'm trying to sell you Bitcoin, it's not true. Don't do it. But yeah, LinkedIn is the best place to find me. It's Nicholas with an H, Capman with no H, so it's not Chapman. And the book is everywhere. You can get a hardcover, softcover, the electronic version, and we've also done Audible. So
Wonderful.
that's
Very
it.
cool. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for your time. Just really appreciate you coming on and sharing all these great insights with our audience.
It was my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thanks. And folks, the conversation doesn't stop here. Follow Vidori on LinkedIn for updates on new episodes. Ask us questions. We'd love to get your feedback on any of the Amend and Progress podcasts to date. You can subscribe to Amend and Progress on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Until next time, this is Annalise signing off for Amend and Progress. Have a fantastic day.